All right, everyone, welcome back to Statement Piece. Today we have a special guest.
We have with us G. Celestine, designer of Soulmates Never Die, and also G. Celestine. So today's theme is gender fluidity and the idea of androgyny in fashion. So would you like to explain your background and how you got interested in fashion and the interplay of those concepts as you've developed your career?
The way that I stumbled into fashion was actually really funny. So originally, I'm from New Orleans. So this is like post Katrina, and my mom actually had like a Bazaar magazine. I had never seen Bazaar magazine ever in my life. So I'm flipping through this huge magazine because you guys remember like how big they were. They're like just
Mhm.
gigantic. And I'm flipping through and I see this D&G ad, and I'm looking and I'm just like, this has got to be like one of the most like kind of explicit but also like intriguing things I've ever seen in my life. And from there, I just kind of like got into like the rabbit hole of like digging through to find out like what it was and what fashion was. And I didn't know anything about like fashion houses, like nothing like that. So it just kind of opened up like this whole new realm as to like of something that I never knew existed. Um, Before then, I did like t-shirts and stuff like that, but it was never to that extent. Growing up, my grandma like she sewed and stuff, so she taught me how to use a sewing machine. But outside of like basic stuff like fixing jeans and stuff like that, I had never really like dabbled into creating my own pieces up until like that moment, and that was like at about like 15 or 16. Um, from there, I just kind of started to learn about like Yves Saint Laurent, Alexander McQueen, and then from there, it was just kind of like, oh my goodness, like you mean to tell me I can do all these things? You know what I mean? So then that's when I really got into it, but I always gravitated naturally more towards menswear.
Mhm.
So especially like growing up seeing like my grandpa was one of those like super groovy dudes who like every Sunday he got like super dressed up, smelled good, you know what I mean, had like the very like I call them like pop-in button-up shirts that like you could see it like a mile away from like the inside of his suit jacket, you know what I mean? So that was just kind of something that I always just kind of like gravitated towards. And that's what I naturally like went with, you know what I mean? And from there, I guess I kind of like started to realize like that I was more of an androgynous person, but I didn't really know what that was. And then from there, I just kind of continued to develop that as my style, to be honest.
Do you still have that D&G ad?
I sure do.
You do?
Yeah, every time I go to my mom's house when I go back home, like it's inside of my closet door, like it's still there, like tacked up.
I love that.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome. So then how did you get started with Soulmates Never Die?
So with Soulmates Never Die, I had reached a point where I knew that I wanted to go into luxury wear, but I wasn't really necessarily ready to give up streetwear or but I still wanted something that was unisex. I still wanted something that people could throw on, be comfortable or rock with their sneakers. At the time, the name I was actually in Italy, and in Italy there's like this small town called Gaeta, and I was walking through the streets, and they actually have like a part of the town that's covered in graffiti. So they let artists come in and spray paint, and there was literally like this one bare wall, but it said like "Soulmates Never Die," and for some reason that just like stuck with me.
So, what is your creative process behind designing the items and just creating them in general?
I'm one of those people that I have to be inspired by something. It definitely has to be like one of those like aha moments for me, where it's just like I can kind of see everything play forward in my head.
Mhm.
Even if it's like an image of something, or if I do see like a pair of sneakers, like for example with the Chunky Dunkies, like as soon as I saw them, I was just like, I already know what I want to do with that. So that's usually how it goes.
What inspires you most when you are designing?
Honestly, I always think about like the people that I wish I could dress. Like for me, like I always go back to like those nostalgic like B2K and NSYNC moments. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like, yo, if I could have dressed them back then, like I would have made sure they were fly and this and that. You know what I mean?
Are there
Right.
any current celebrities that you would really want to dress?
Whew, there's like a long list. Right now though, I'm not gonna lie, like I'm very, very intrigued by like the basketball players for sure. So if I could like
Mm.
get my hands on like PJ Tucker or LeBron James,
Mhm.
Mm.
even Luca, like I love it. You know what I mean? So definitely. Might even slide my hand at Tom Brady. I don't know.
Did you always design kind of growing up and then you decided to create Soulmates Never Die, or what was kind of your career arc into that space?
I was actually in college for graphic design.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So that's where like the t-shirts and stuff came from. So I was one of those kids who had like that weird like rock star slash emo phase, but I was heavy into graphics at that time too. So I went to Full Sail University for a little while doing graphic design. So that's where like that whole like design concept kind of came from. And then from there, I learned about like the Art Institute and like, oh, fashion design students. And I think that was also around the time where they were actually starting to implement the menswear specialization, like, because I had no idea that you could actually specialize in it either. So
Mm.
that's where like that kind of came from.
Oh, wow. So how would you say your own experiences have influenced the design process and the products in general?
Honestly, so I would say, especially from a personal influence, from me actually like learning about who I am,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of allowed me to break down barriers as far as like my creative process, because I then realized that things don't always have to be a specific way, or they don't always have to be done to a certain manner. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if this is working for me and I'm still able to create a product that is something I'm proud of, then that's fine by me.
So, how do you define fluidity in general and specifically in fashion?
Honestly, for me, like fluidity, I think that right now people just kind of think of fluidity as like a certain attitude. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, this person feels like they don't really fit into this box, so they carry themselves in X, Y, and Z. But in all reality, that's exactly what it is. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times people spend so much of their young adulthood trying to find where they fit in. And it wasn't until up until recently where we realized that no, we don't have to fit into any box. You know what I mean? Like fluidity is being able to cross over into many boxes and still be yourself. I always joke with people like when we go shopping, I'm like, look, I'm letting you know now, I shop on both sides of the store. Just mind your business.
How do you define androgyny?
So for me, androgyny is just being able to take all of those genders and mesh them into what you feel represents you. It took me a long time to kind of realize that I don't have to just take one thing or the other thing. I can just take bits and pieces from whatever I want to kind of help build or create whatever it is that I feel that I am.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I think that whole concept is really interesting and I feel like has been more prevalent, especially in recent years. I mean, I remember when Billy Porter wore that look with the top was the tuxedo top and then it was a huge ballroom type
All day.
skirt that, or even like on TikTok right now, the WAP dance is going viral to Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion's new song. And for those who don't know what WAP is, you can look it up on Urban Dictionary, but it is not worship and prayer. But even today, I saw a TikToker who has had to like quote unquote come out as straight before he did the dance. But I feel like at this point, it's basically clickbait that he's doing it because he's sort of messing around with this whole potential idea that he's a little bit queer and then sexuality gets intertwined with his like potential femme behavior. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like clickbait.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's queer baiting, I guess
Yeah,
was is like the term for
clickbaiting.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I know
so
you mentioned that you at one point looked into specializing in menswear. So do you think that fashion should be still segmented into menswear and women's wear and people have the option to look into different types of gendered clothing, or are you kind of hoping that the fashion industry will move towards just unisex in general?
I'm really hoping that they do move towards a more unisex in general when it comes to sizing and the pieces that they create. I do know
Mm.
that there's still some barriers that you have to cross, especially when it comes to body types. Not everyone can afford, you know what I mean, custom fit to make sure that things fit, especially tailored to their body. So that's like understandable. But at the same time, I do think that we have reached a point in technology where it's just like, hey, you can actually um, change pieces a bit to where that they actually do complement women just as well as they complement men.
I feel like there's kind of differences in gender identity amongst fit and in that way, as you mentioned, but also in style as well, because there's like more femme styles and more masculine styles. So do you think that that kind of like exact box style should be in existence, or what are your thoughts on that?
I would say yes, just because it kind of goes into more of like your style preference.
Right.
versus like your actual gender. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So because you can very very much so be more masculine, but you know what I mean, prefer femme colors. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I definitely think that that's something that's okay. But as far as like having to feel uncomfortable because I would much rather wear a male button up versus a female, like it's
Right.
stupid.
And I feel like a lot of people may
Right.
not realize like how gendered clothing actually is. Like if you think about a lot of items, for example, like um like pants or skirts with pockets that aren't actually like have no utility.
Yeah.
Or even if you think about like a button-up shirt, now you see more oversized styles, quote unquote, but a shirt that's meant for a woman, I guess, and you'll see like the waist cinched in and things of that sort. Even recently, I was looking at this sweatshirt company. Obviously, as like loungewear has become more popular during the pandemic, and there's a difference between the sweatshirts for like male and female. And I was like, what could possibly be the difference in a sweatshirt? But for the females, like it's slightly brought in into the waist, like it grazes the like hip area, I guess. Whereas like obviously the male one is just kind of like a drop down, like regular unisex sweatshirt. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's so bizarre to me that like things like that still exist so commonly today. Like who says that women don't need pockets that they can actually use?
Because we don't have things to put in pockets.
Exactly.
No, I agree 100%. It's funny because I was actually just having that conversation today. One of my friends, he's older, and he wanted a pair of my shorts, but the inseam is a lot higher. So, you know, he's older,
Mm.
he's a little bit more old school, and he's asking me like, "You don't want to make any that go below the knee?" And I'm just like, "Look, man." I don't want capri pants. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, but it's like you forget things like that because some guys are still very insecure about stuff like that. We all have knees, we all have thighs. It's okay if we see them.
I guess in my experience, I've definitely seen more women open to wearing menswear, but not as much the other way around. Do you think that's something like you've experienced as well? And is that something that you think will change in the future?
I've definitely experienced it all too well. Especially because I tend to have more guy friends. It's always harder trying to get them to climb out of that box. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
it's always the initial like, oh my goodness, like no, like I'm not wearing that. Like, you know what I mean? And it's just like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
give it a chance. Like, put it on. You know what I mean? Like, that's why Jaden Smith is like one of my absolute favorites because you know
I
what I mean. Like
love
him, like
Jaden.
he isn't he the greatest? You know what I mean? And he's just like, I mean, I'm wearing this, like, so what? And it looks
Yeah.
good on him. I think that you will see more men not caring about it, but as far as it being a
Hmm.
lot more across the board, I think that's gonna take a little bit more time, especially because of how political fashion tends to be as of lately. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So
Hmm.
I think that's
Hmm.
also like one of the biggest things that kind of holds like males in general back from being a lot more fluid than they could be.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Even the idea of painting your nails has been kind of a thing that I've seen guys on social media trend to more, especially the
Yeah.
guys. And a lot of TikTokers will take on this e-boy persona, dye their hair black, paint their nails black, and it's like become a thing now that they're these like hard emo boys, they're e-boys, they paint their nails black, like they're so cool, but they
Oh
don't
my
paint their nails
goodness.
any other color. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting when they paint their nails. I think initially I would think painting their nails would be kind of breaking that boundary, but they've almost carved out this other area of if I paint my nails black, it makes me more masculine, but any other color is feminine.
No, absolutely. And it's so annoying. Because it just reminds me of like back when I was like middle school and the guys would like, you know, take a Sharpie and like paint their nails. But that was like the only color that was allowed. You know, only the girls
Yeah.
that like the pink or the yellow. Another designer that I really like out in LA right now, and he always like he'll dye his hair whatever color, he'll paint his nails whatever color, and he does not
Mm.
care. You know what I mean? And it's just like, but it's dope. It looks so good on him. Like, who cares if your nails are lime green? Like, so what?
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's a lot of like with the notion of dressing for the other gender or to attract someone else is a really interesting concept. That I think is so prevalent even in like fashion today. Like we spoke to a sales director at Man Repeller and she was talking about the story behind it. And it was this whole idea that Leandra, who was the founder of Man Repeller, would buy all these clothes that her friend said would repel men. But really, I think a lot of it comes down to like you will really look good in whatever you feel the most confident in. And like that's why
Hmm.
Jaden can really pull off all his looks and everything of that sort. And I think obviously it's a personal journey. I think finding your own personal identity and like figuring out what makes you feel most confident.
And I think the one time I realized where it was really kind of bad for men, where it was just like when I went into Target and there were wet wipes, but they were designed for men. Like
What? Wait, in what way?
the packaging was black.
Oh,
You know what I
okay,
mean?
okay.
I think it was like scented to be like more masculine. You know what I mean? And it's just
Oh,
like,
like Axe?
yeah, like Axe, but think wet wipes.
Okay.
Are we there? Like, are we really there where like you can't use wet wipes because they're not masculine and coming out of a black packaging? Like that's come on, guys.
So, do you
Yeah,
think celebrities and musicians have increased public awareness and acceptance of fluidity, specifically in fashion? Like, one example I think of is like Harry Styles, who everyone, like a lot of people are a huge fan of, but he does have more femme style.
Hmm. I completely agree. But artists have always had like that ability to just kind of be whoever they were, and people just either
mm,
accepted it or they didn't. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
even if you go back to the 80s with like Aerosmith, like those guys wore skin tight pants, and guess what? Females were still falling all over them. Guys were still playing their music. Prince, come on, Prince. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
true.
he
yes.
Yeah,
killed it in the platforms, and guess what? Same thing. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So fast forward to now, even with rap music, I've seen a lot of the newer guys take on a more like emo approach.
It's interesting. I feel like when you work in the arts industry and you're a man, you're seen as bold and confident for dressing outside of the box. But when you're in any other industry, you're seen as femme or like I feel like in last summer I worked in finance and I realized that one big aspect, as silly as it seemed, was the fact that I felt restricted in the way that I dressed. And because I'm so passionate about fashion, I just found it to be kind of odd that I would choose to work in a place where I couldn't wear what I wanted. And so, and I think in the same way, like men in that environment would be seen as kind of an outcast and weird in a way. But when you're in the arts, it's almost as though it will increase your following and up your platform if you're bold enough to be out of the box.
And so actually I did a bespoke internship a couple years ago, and the guy that I was interning under he said like one of the most amazing things that I had ever heard in my life. And he was saying, pay attention between the difference of the guys that come in here and they dress to impress other guys versus like the guys that come in here to impress themselves. I think that that's one of those huge things that like makes a difference between artist and your everyday person. It's really hard to find someone who works what would be considered a normal job, you know what I mean, to actually have that kind of confidence. Most guys don't. And if they do, like you said, they're looked at as
Right.
if like they're femme or, oh, he's a little, like, no,
Mm-hmm.
this is just his thing.
So, how have you incorporated your ideas on gender fluidity and androgyny as well into Soulmates Never Die, in terms of like both the fitting and style, whether it be slightly femme or masculine?
So with this one, I just definitely made sure that so like I started with these shorts because I wanted to let them know right off the back, like, hey, this isn't gonna be like your typical sportswear type of gig, but I do want you guys to understand that it will be fashionable. So it started with the design, you know what I mean? Like obviously somebody even referred to it as like more flamboyant, which I mean, that's fine by me. Like I want people to feel seen like when they wear my clothes, you know what I mean? Um
Yeah, it
and then
makes it
just
a statement piece.
exactly. So that along with like the fit, I want them to fit well, to be cropped well. So making sure that, the inseam was shorter. They're a little bit more slim fit, but you actually have room in the waist. Taking those small steps to just make people feel like regardless of what gender you are, you can put them on and look good. That's like my really main focus.
Yeah, so looking at your site, one of my favorite products is the Aben Yo Jerry jumper shorts.
I know,
So
they're
what
so
was
cool.
yeah, it's really interesting. So how do you kind of come up with the ideas and what is the process of going from ideation to execution in terms of manufacturing and things like that?
So as far as like the idea, like I was telling you guys earlier, it just comes from like what I see. And then from there, one of the like unfortunate parts about it is that once I have a vision in my mind, like it can't steer from that too much. So from there, I just kind of go into like that crazy process of trying to like create exactly what it is I see in my mind. So when I initially saw those sneakers, I immediately went back to like the old school Ben and Jerry commercial with the cows. So so that was kind of like my inspiration. Excuse me, for those shorts. So after that, it was just a matter of, okay, now I really got to dig into the nitty gritty of the actual like pattern of these shorts. So that was kind of like the biggest thing for me with these, because I didn't want them to be long. I didn't want them to be too baggy. Didn't want them to be too heavy. So it was just a lot of back and forth between that. And the manufacturing piece came in to be not as difficult. It was just a matter of being able to get the fabric made with the pattern. Sometimes people can be really difficult. They love the word no. I don't know what it is about manufacturers, but they love the word no. Like, no, that's not going to work. Like, well, show me why it won't work so that I can fix it so that it will work. So was finally able to actually get the pattern onto the mesh fabric. You know what I mean? And then after that, it was just a lot of um, foul play with making sure that it fit well on both male and female. And then once it was like perfect, then we just went into producing them.
And where are
Right.
your
So
items manufactured?
Right now, since I'm over here in the Middle East, I've been working with a company here. But when I'm back in San Diego, I utilize in California.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
so the manufacturing happens in both places?
For right now, yes. Because of the pandemic issues, it was just a lot of like,
Mm,
oh well, we can't ship over there, or you know, we can't.
right.
We only utilize UPS or FedEx, and we actually hit a point over here where they shut all of that down, so they weren't even allowing mail into the country at all.
Oh,
Mm,
wow.
Yeah, so it was just one of those things where it's kind of using what I got. You know what I mean?
yeah. So where are you in the Middle East?
I'm in Bahrain,
Okay,
Manama,
awesome.
Bahrain. Yeah.
How did you end up in Bahrain?
So I'm finishing out my active duty Navy tour.
Mm.
So yeah, this is like coming up on the end of 7 years. Um
Oh wow.
yeah, and they needed support over here, so gotta
Oh
send
wow.
something
So
over.
your career arc was school for graphic design and then serving in the Navy while also pursuing fashion on the side.
Yeah,
Oh wow.
Wow.
yeah.
That's wild.
That
It's
is.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I always find it cool to meet people who have multifaceted careers because I think Sita and I both identify with that, especially now running this podcast, in addition to kind of our other pursuits. It's always nice to meet people who are doing fashion in addition to something else that's kind of way out.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I also related to you when you said, you know, that part about picking a career where you don't really get to choose what you wear, because
Mm,
I
Mm,
definitely do not.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
wow.
interesting. Have you been able to tinker at all with the Navy outfits to still cater to expression that you would want, or do you just kind of accept that it's not a space for fashion?
So what I tend to notice, especially with the military in general, we take a lot of pride in expressing our fashion when we're on liberty. So whenever we're off, that's
Mm,
when you'll see everybody kind of like go out of their way to like put their best on. So when it comes to being in uniform, you know what I mean? Like people usually just take pride in having like that uniform on and looking good. There's not much that you can really do to personalize camo.
hmm.
When it comes to being in the military.
What are your thoughts on now seeing camouflage in streetwear?
Honestly, for me, it was a great thing because I've always loved camouflage even before I
Hmm.
joined. There was this show on Netflix. They took it off. I can't even remember, but it was this guy. He would do like different episodes of like different parts of fashion. And I remember one episode specifically, he covered like camouflage. And there was like this huge warehouse of like all these like different camouflages back from like Civil War and World War One. And it was just like, it kind of like blew my mind.
And I feel like
So
there's
yeah,
so many more variations of it now.
and it's crazy. People are getting really creative and like creating their own. So
Oh,
So what
definitely.
drew you to the serving in the Navy?
honestly, like it's the story is funny because originally I was actually going to go into the Marines, right? Because of one of my close friends at the time, he was a Marine. I had an uncle who was in the Marines, so I was just like, you know, follow the family. I'm gonna join the Marines. But at that time, I already had like a full sleeve, and they had just changed their tattoo policy. So
Mm.
I walk in and the staff sergeant, he was like, "I'm so sorry. Like, I really want to take you, but I can't. We've just updated policies." So I was like, it's okay. Maybe it's not meant to be." And literally, as I'm walking out, the recruiter from the Navy office, I guess she was like eavesdropping, and she was just like, "We'll take you." And I was just like, "Okay, like I guess I'll go see what you guys are talking about."
What is your day-to-day, and how do you kind of intermingle your Navy duties as well as your job as a designer?
All right, so when I tell you this, you're gonna think I'm really crazy, but so I don't really sleep as much because our shifts run so long. So right now, with my duties right now, we stand 12-hour watches, and then I come home here, and then I probably work for like another 5 to 6, take a nap, and then go back to work.
Oh
So
my
God.
gosh.
yeah,
That's like how
so that's
Sita sleeps. Sita always texts me at 6 a.m.
Wow.
So how has COVID impacted your Navy duties as well as your business?
Navy duties has made us very a lot more busy because we've had to break down the number of people that we can have at work at once. So especially during the day, it's a lot less people there to help you support the things that you need to get taken care of. Which has made it a little bit more stressful, but it's just one of those things that you just kind of overcome. Business wise, it's been pretty sucky, you know what I mean? Just because I've been limited on where I can get my things from. So a lot of like the screen printers that I would normally use from back at home, they're either not taking new orders, or if they are taking new orders, they're backlogged like 4+ weeks. Trying to do things in a timely manner so that you can still release them, but it's also one of those things where you're kind of playing with time, because if you do want to release something by a certain date, but you haven't finished everything in time, you just kind of run into those situations.
One other question that we like to ask our guests is, what is your favorite statement piece?
Right now, I would say my favorite statement piece that I own is I actually just got some custom chunky dunkies on like a high top Air Jordan 1. So that's like my legit favorite right now. Like, I
You'll
think
have
they're
to
like
send us a
the best
photo. We
thing
can
ever.
put it in the video.
Okay. See right here.
Yes, exactly.
And then I don't know if you guys watched the Alexander McQueen documentary.
Yeah.
So when he did that really wild like fashion show that had like the really like fat lady hooked up to like the ventilators, that right there is like my favorite statement piece of all time. Like, I feel like it does not get more bolder than that. That whole show was crazy for me, but that
Yeah.
piece right there, yeah, it was just like, it was very like horrific, but also brilliant and all in the same thing. And yeah, it's like ultimate favorite.
Thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
today.
thank
No,
you.
thank you
It's
for having
been
me. You guys are so awesome.